Well, hey everybody, welcome to Always Good News. My name is Mark Miller, and I'm really glad to be back with another episode. We're going to have a great conversation tonight, and I hope you're all doing well, having a good day. So we just wait a couple seconds for some people to jump on and join us. Good to see everybody. Hey, listen, as you're jumping on, let us know where you're watching from. Throw a comment in the comment box. Let us know what city, perhaps if you're joining us from a different country other than Canada, let us know. We always love that. And hey, during the conversation, if you've got a question for our guest tonight, throw that in the question box. And if we get a chance, we will jump to some of those questions as well. So again, welcome. Let us know where you're watching from, everybody. And hey, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you click subscribe. Just a few minutes, I am going to add our guest tonight. And our guest tonight is Pastor Mark Clark from British Columbia. He's also an author. And let me just give you some background on Mark tonight as we jump into our conversation. Born and raised in Toronto, and then became a follower of Jesus in his late teens. He's the founding and senior pastor of Village Church, which is a multi-site church in several different locations and several different provinces as well. He's also the author of The Problem of God, Answering a Skeptic's Challenge to Christianity, as well as a recent book that just came out, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, but The Problem of Jesus, Answering the Skeptic's Challenges to the Scandal of Jesus, a fantastic book. And like I said, Mark resides in Vancouver with Aaron and their 3 daughters. So let me go ahead and add Mark, and we will jump in. Hey everybody, let me know where you're watching from tonight. Throw a comment in the comment box. Hey Mark.
Well, hello sir, how are you?
Awesome. Welcome to Always Good News, bro. So good to have you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. And is my audio okay? We good?
Yeah, sounds good. Can you hear me good?
Good. Yeah, no, doing great.
Okay, awesome. So good. Well, listen, hey, before we jump in, I noticed on Twitter today, we've got Mark A. Clark on the west side. We've got Mark A. Miller on the east side, Atlantic Pacific. We've got the country covered, man. This is gonna be great.
Yeah, how's COVID over there? You doing okay?
Well, you know what? We've had a pretty decent run, and then here in Nova Scotia, we just shut down the whole province for a couple of weeks because we had a spike, and people are a little nervous. So the government shut everything down. So here we are online.
Great. All right. Well, good to be with you. Hopefully you guys are doing
so good to have you. And we're going to jump in. But before we do, Mark, we have a little tradition called This or That, which people aren't going to find that on the back of your book, but they're going to hear it live here. And we're going to throw you under the microscope. Here we go. Sushi or steak?
Oh, gosh, steak.
Uber or taxi?
Uber.
All right. While flying, remember the good old days, window seat or aisle seat?
Oh, always a window. I want to look at what's going on.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, here's one that's unfortunately too common for all of us. So on Zoom, are you looking at a normal background, a virtual background, or a blurred background?
You mean behind me?
When you're on Zoom, do you go virtual or do you go like whatever's behind you, everybody's seeing it?
Yeah, just whatever. Exactly what you're seeing right now. This is my 95% of my Zoom calls. Yeah.
Perfect. Dog or cat?
Have a dog. My wife hates cats, so can't do it.
Now listen, I mentioned in the intro, originally from Toronto, so here we're going to throw this at you. Maple Leafs or Canucks?
Oh, Maple Leafs, 100%. Of course.
You might have lost some followers there, Mark.
No. Nobody cares about the Canucks out here. I mean, they did a few years ago, but when they were good. When I'm 14, it's Potvin and Gilmore and Anderchuk. You know, it's primo. You know, it's primo time. So I was living the dream and playing hockey out in my front every day, and that was when the Leafs were good too. So I don't know if I don't really follow hockey, so I don't know if they're good anymore. But
yeah. All right. Well, last one, and this will kind of jump for our conversation as well. I'm going to make you choose, so this might be hard. Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John?
Oh man,
what are you picking, man?
I gotta go with John. If I gotta go to a desert island, I'm going with John.
Fantastic, Mark. Again, so good to have you. Everybody that's jumping on, Mark Clark, pastor of Village Church, as well as author. We're going to jump in. Mark, before we jump into our conversation, I want to talk about your book as well. I would love for you to share with us your journey, how you came to follow Christ. What did that look like? How old were you? How did that process unfold for you? I know it was a little bit later in your teen years. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, I didn't grow up in a home with any church, Bible, God, so that was not something that my family was pumped up about. I tell the story at the beginning of The Problem of God about my dad was such a ardent atheist that my mom wanted to name my brother Matthew, and they said he's got to spell his name with one T because they don't want to be biblical. And then 4 years later, had me and called me Mark. So that was kind of the home I grew up in, was like this. It wasn't like against God constantly. It was just like it didn't exist, the conversation. And so I went to Christian summer camp, heard about Jesus, got interested, and then started really exploring kind of the end of my high school days. And a guy came up to me and shared Jesus with me. And I was a skeptic. So I was kind of going at it from the philosophical, scientific, all the different things, and just came to see that, man, Christianity is this compelling, beautiful, true thing. Historically, I'm kind of, that romantic rationalist, like bring both of those worlds together. And that's what I gave my life to Jesus. And then for 2 years, didn't go to church, didn't do anything, just would tell people about Jesus in my hometown.
Wow.
And then finally went to the church. Some pastors started pouring into me, and then, ended up going into ministry, which was the last place I thought I'd end up.
No, thanks for sharing that. Listen, so the next thing is referencing your church. We, especially this year, like we're hearing more pastors are discouraged, things are difficult, but usually the stories we're hearing is churches, dwindling attendance, struggling at best. Some are closing, but that's not, the reality of Village Church. In 2010, along with your wife, Erin, and some friends, you started a church, and now it's multi-site, multi-province, which is incredible. Tell us some stories. What's God doing in and through Village Church? Let us know about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 11 years now. So, you constantly think about yourself as a church plant, and then you realize, oh, wait, we're 11 years old, But we started out and just started teaching the Bible and being gospel centered. And, people said that might not work in Canada. We need to do a different approach. But we were like, oh, that's the only approach that I think is going to work. And so we did. And people started to meet Jesus. And then they started bringing their friends, and church started to grow. And so now we have sites, locations in Vancouver, Calgary, and then we're starting Winnipeg and a couple in Toronto as well. So slowly but surely doing some cool things, and we have like about 5 or 6 in the greater Vancouver area, and then it moves over. So it's been crazy. Now 2020 was a weird year. We haven't gathered since March of 2020 because we rent all of our facilities, so we can't get together, even like 50 people, like can't do it. And so we've been shifted to online, and we've been growing. Like we've seen people, we did a meeting yesterday, just talking to the people who've joined our church since going online, who call themselves kind of Village Church online members. And there was just a bunch of people on that meeting. We were just talking vision, ministry, how to get involved, how to be part of this thing even after, COVID's over. And so it's been really cool kind of seeing what God's doing with the shift to online and kind of the leveraging of the technology and all that. So it's been a blast.
Let me ask you, you made a point there that when you started and you were like, Gospel Center, we're going to preach the Bible, and you had voices saying, it might not work. Tell me about that conviction. What was in your heart, and what were some of those, like what did those voices, what were they suggesting?
Yeah, well, I think we want to be pragmatic, right? And so we want to do what works, and that's good. I want to do what works too. There's no point sitting around just being a bunch of, Christians who believe stuff and say things in a way nobody cares about in the real world. And so the conviction, the temptation is you either just kind of do non-biblical felt needs stuff, or you do just all fundamentalist Bible stuff, and you forget culture. And this one's all about culture, but forgets the Bible. And I was trying to do both. So basically we just preach classic kind of expository preaching, verse by verse through books of the Bible. Takes us 3 years to get through it. And every sermon is about, you know, Jesus, the gospel, the cross, the resurrection. You know, it's an amazing thing. So my grandfather got saved. He's the other Christian in my family. He's now in June, he'll be 99 years old.
Wow.
He got saved at a Billy Graham crusade in Toronto.
Come on.
Like in the 50s or 60s, bro. Like crazy story that would take up most of our time, but amazing story. Faithful man, prayed for us. I wouldn't be anywhere without him. And so it's pretty cool to now be, you know, chatting with you and your organization. So
yeah, so cool. And hey, Mark, it's amazing because we hear that a lot as we partner with churches across the country and do different events and evangelism trainings and so on. You'd be shocked that over and over we hear those kind of stories. From my grandfather, my parents, I had this, you know, connection, you know, watching TV or back in the day radio. Awesome. Let me ask you this, and you referenced it a couple minutes ago. You were a skeptic. It seems to me, you know, just following and watching you, reading your stuff, that you really have a focus on two groups: Christians, you know, followers of Christ, and the skeptics. And that kind of seems to be your sweet spot, like where you're going. Why? How? What motivates those two crowds for you?
That's a really weird sweet spot to be in because it doesn't really make sense. Yeah, I mean, that's my heart, right? There's some pastors who start churches who are really good at going like, I'm about the church, you know, when I want to constantly just talk to the church, think about the church, love ecclesiology, love talking about church stuff, and, you know, use words like fellowship and, you know, all these kind of, you know, doxology. Yeah, like stuff, koinonia, yeah. And it's like, cool. That's not me. Like, I get bored with that stuff pretty quick, and I want to go after the person who's not here yet, but not only the person who's not here yet, but the person who's thinking, who's like, you know, there's reasons I don't believe in this. And I want to try to convince them the best I can. So when I'm up there, you know, preaching the Bible, I'm like, okay, verse by verse. And then every 2 seconds I'm stopping going, okay, now if you're a seeker and if you're a skeptic and you're here, maybe you're a Buddhist, maybe you're just an agnostic, maybe you're an atheist, and you have these thoughts about God. And I'm just constantly talking to them and trying to speak about philosophy and psychology, and they're, you know, do that week in and week out. And all of a sudden those people start showing up and actually, you know, meet Jesus and see the value of the Bible. And so I really want to try to, you know, we want to do discipleship and evangelism, and we don't think those are two, you know, separate ends of the pole here. Right. We think we could probably do them both. We might be, you know, a little naive and idealistic, but we're trying to do both week in and week out. And so that's kind of, that's who I want to speak to. I want to, you know, convince the skeptic and inspire the believer. And that's kind of the theme of the book too, is like the problem of Jesus. How do I make Jesus, you know, awe-inspiring for the person who already follows him and might be able to rethink and be equipped, but also for the skeptic to go, oh, you know what? I didn't believe any of this, but now I see there are good reasons to.
Yeah, I love that. And I also, you know, as an organization, our mission is obviously evangelism and training others in that. And I think from the perspective of you kind of pastoring, it takes the familiarity away from, you know, the churchgoer, the person that maybe has become familiar, to always filter through what would the skeptic be thinking? What would the person that doesn't know Jesus, how would they, you know, they come in and, you know, aren't you glad you're washed in the blood of the Lamb? You know, and they're hearing these kind of things. And yet if you're speaking and communicating in a way, it also keeps us as followers of Christ sharp, because we want to communicate that in our spheres of influence. So, man, I love that. Now let's talk about your recent book, and we're gonna dive into this. And I've been reading it, really enjoying it, Mark.
Thank you.
And it's called "The Problem of Jesus: Answering a Skeptic's Challenges to the Scandal of Jesus." Let me ask you this: what is so scandalous about Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, he was scandalous to his culture in ways that I think what we tend to view, especially in the post-Christian West, is we are attracted to a Jesus who's like, Jesus is my friend, he's my homie, he's a good example, he's a good leader, he taught the golden rule, that's really good stuff. But we skip the parts where it was like very scandalous, whether that's, hey, I'm the only way, exclusivity, or his teachings on hell, or him claiming to be God, or, these things that are like, oh man. So when I write the book, it's like, okay, how do I take the miracles and show that they weren't just helping people? If all they did was help a handful of people 2,000 years ago, I'm not sure that was the point. They had this scandalous thing. His parables,
Yeah.
his stories weren't just like pithy little stories, earthly stories with heavenly meanings. They had like this subversive upend the powers. You got everything wrong about God and salvation and yourself and your identity and everything. All these massive scandalous things that were an offense, that people would trip over them, whether they were religious people or agnostic, non-religious people. And so it's all about that kind of scandal that Jesus, if you really start to lean in and look at what he's saying and doing, you're going to realize that your life probably isn't safe. He doesn't just get to, if every time you read the Bible, if it's just confirming everything you already believe, you're probably not reading it right.
Right.
God's probably going to push against you in your life. And if he doesn't, you're making him in your image versus, allowing him to be who he is. So
yeah, it should be challenging you 100% when you're reading it, not just Let me read just a quote, because you mentioned it, exclusivity. Chapter 14 says this. If you haven't grabbed this book yet, I want to encourage everybody to check it out. Mark writes, the only thing even more scandalous to a modern skeptic than the idea that Jesus is God is the idea that he is the only way for someone to experience salvation. The claim of exclusivity, that Jesus is the right way and every other way of trying to find God is wrong, repels our culture. And then another part says exclusivity claims are not popular in our culture. And is that the absolute truth? Let me, another quote from your book that I loved, Mark. It says, in the end, we have to actually pick a side, meaning there's no neutral. We either love, follow, and give our lives to Jesus, or we hate, reject, and want to kill him.
Yeah.
Good night.
Mic drop. I mean, I don't know how to add to that, but, I think what we have to do is we have to then take that truth and go, how do I communicate it to a culture that doesn't believe it? Or else we're just kind of ringing in the dark. So part of it is really bringing that into the world of our friends and our family. At the end of the day, guys, we're all called to be evangelists at some level.
Mm-hmm.
What I try to tell my church is like, look, forget about just people coming to Jesus at 9 and 11 on a Sunday. Like, what if they were coming to Jesus on Wednesday afternoon in your living room? Like, right. This is what we're talking about. This is what we want to happen. And if that happens, that's when the church just breaks out, becomes alive, and the gospel starts moving across Canada and the world. Yep. So that's what my hope is, even in introducing the book to the regular Joe. It's like, equip the regular Joe to go, I don't have to wait for my leader. This is my job to present Jesus as this compelling figure.
Exactly right. Mark, do you think that's what God's doing right now in the church, especially here in the West? I feel like there's a line being drawn where it's that, hold fast to that truth. Those who know the truth, will be strong and do great exploits, the Bible says. Is that line being drawn, do you think, in the church right now, to hold fast to these, these truths of Scripture versus, some of the wavering that we are seeing?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a tension. I think people are feeling a bit more of the isolated version of Christianity, and they're going, oh yeah, do I need the church? And so there's a lot of deconstruction and deconversion going on. It's people saying, hey, I don't want to be involved in this anymore because of the way that Christians have basically done a bad job of following Jesus. And my message to you, if that's you, is like, make sure you don't throw Christianity out because Christians are fumbling it. It's like, make sure you're looking right at Jesus, and you're actually, accepting or denying Christianity based on him, which is kind of part of the spirit of the book. Is like, let's try to clear away the nonsense and go, here's Jesus. What are you going to do with him? And so I think that's, an interesting thing. And then on the other side of that, we got to make sure that we as the church aren't holding on to institutions and systems that we built up that aren't purely about Jesus. And so that if a generation is going to walk away, if my daughter, she's 14 right now, if she's seeing things in Christianity that aren't actually Jesus things, they're just church things,
right?
she's going to reject Christianity based on that by the time she's 20, then I got to question whether those things are worth it. Because, I think D.A. Carson years ago, and I'm going to hack this because I didn't write it down, but something, said something along the lines of, one generation assumes the gospel, the next generation forgets it, and the next one walks away from it. It's like, you can't assume it. You got to make sure it's explicit, but there's going to be different iterations of the church, the structure that gathers around the gospel, depending on geography, country, place, year, generation, and that's okay. That can be flexible. So I think we're seeing a sussing out, a wheat and tares kind of moment here of some of that stuff. But I agree with you. There's also the movement of the church towards theologies and orthodoxies, whatever, that are like a mess. Yeah. And the church has got to be like, look, we actually still believe the Bible, as crazy as it might sound.
Yeah. No, so good. What do you think, Mark? What do you think are the top maybe 2 or 3 challenges of Jesus that you feel like skeptics in our culture have right now? Like,
probably Jesus is God for sure, and that's not just skeptics, but that's people of other religions. Obviously he didn't claim that. I think the Gospels, it's been 2 chapters talking about the legitimacy of the Gospels. I think bottom line is, I think people think the Bible's a joke, and so why would I believe it? Why would I follow Jesus when these stories that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're a joke? In regard to history, they're a joke. They're making this up. They're just creating a religion. I think, that one. I think hell. I think the concept of the resurrection. I think that even the teachings of Jesus, we accept. I remember watching Deepak Chopra say, oh, I love, the fact that Jesus is all about loving your enemy. But then he was like, but he didn't really talk about hell. That the church made that up. It's like, okay, now we're just selecting what we think Jesus said and what he didn't say. And I think there's a version of Christianity that moves into the next generation where we have to figure out how to be theologically orthodox while being culturally incarnational to what we're speaking into and how we're speaking into it. Because if we're not intellectually, Charles Malik years ago, again, the Billy Graham Center Institute at Wheaton College in 1961, Charles Malik talked about the idea of, if we lose the mind of people, we've lost the world. You might try to get at their heart and become sentimental and nostalgic in Christianity and sing the same worship songs that last 12 minutes and say the same thing. But if you lose the mind of the world, then you've actually lost the world. And I don't like a Christianity that's going down a route that has abandoned the life of the mind. And I think when I look at my daughters, they're going to abandon a Christianity that's not smart, that's not saying, look, it's Christian. The university was a 12th century Christian invention. Christians invented science. Christians invented, all of these things. We can't be afraid of it. And we have a generation, they're going to get 20 years old. They're going to go, my parents think the world is flat. Forget about it. I don't want to believe all this stuff that they believe. And it's like, oh my goodness, what happened to us?
Yeah.
Why did we begin to think about all these false dichotomies about Bible or science or God and the mind? And we've abandoned that. And I want to try to bring that back into the center of Christianity, where no, you don't abandon the mind. This is the life of the mind.
Right. And the Bible will stand up.
Yeah. The
right.
Bible,
Scripture will stand.
100%, as long as we're reading it right.
Yeah.
Right. When he says the 4 corners of the earth didn't actually mean the world's flat. Everyone calm down. That's a bad reading of the Bible, right? Like, you have to read it in its particular context. And that is where there's this fascinating, this might be a little controversial, but just for the sake of a conversation here, or a little thought process, it's fascinating. Alistair McGrath years ago wrote this book, Dangerous Idea, or The Most Dangerous Idea, or whatever. Basically, you have Catholicism, and he was saying Protestantism was a dangerous idea. And one of the examples he uses is, you move away from trained people who kind of know how to read the Bible, and you hand it beautifully to the regular Joe. And so Protestantism says, priesthood of all believers, the cobbler is the same as the clergy. Awesome. That's great. But now the cobbler's sitting at home reading Revelation, and he has no idea what it means. And so now we have the same scenario now. Everybody is like, hey, let's put the Bible in the hands of the people. Of course we should. And everyone's at home taking Instagram photos, coming up with every crazy interpretation of the Bible under the sun. And we can't do anything about it because we're like, yep, well, that's you. The power's in the hands of the people. You know, it's a very interesting world and shift we've had over the last 200 years that we've seen take place. And I would love to see a corrective where we're like, yes, the Bible holds up, but let's make sure we're not saying the Bible's trying to say something it's not trying to say.
Yeah. And you do just a brilliant job for those who haven't read the book yet, just even painting a picture of the Gospels and the different lens and how they were written, just beautiful. Mark, I referenced this a couple minutes ago. As an organization, obviously, we are laser focused on proclaiming the gospel and training others. So coming alongside churches, really encouraging people. How do you have conversations about Christ? How do you do it in a way that's compelling and that is practical? And but we often hear feedback, especially from people who have been followers of Jesus for a long time, perhaps, but they struggle when it comes to sharing the gospel, how to articulate it. But even in terms of skeptics, which we talked about, how to answer skeptics, when tough questions come up, defending their faith. What would your encouragement be to people who want to share their faith in this culture, but struggle? Maybe they're just fearful of it, or how would you encourage them? What's important?
It's going to be relational based. So you're going to be able to make withdrawals in relation to deposits. And so, Christians are willing to stand up and preach at everybody. And it's like, have you leaned into me lately? Do you even ask me any questions? Do you care? Or just you have this relationship with me where you're right and you're going to have this posture that you're going to tell me I'm wrong. So it really is. It's being curious about people. It's about asking questions, about leaning into people. It's also about a bit of the long game. I don't know if you've got to see The Chosen at all, but it's this beautiful picture of Jesus where, he doesn't like call Matthew from the booth and then just download an entire systematic theology on him and hand it. There's like 3 years where these guys they don't know what's happening. He's gone half the time. He walks back in. He doesn't explain stuff. He's all mysterious. When we read the parables, it's funny because they're like, why do you tell parables? And he's like, oh, it's to confuse people. And then we get up and explain them, and because we don't want anyone to be confused. So it's like, there's this beautiful long game mystery of leaning into people and saying, look, I don't need this guy. Yes, there's a line in the sand and maybe the Spirit's working and this person's ready. And I think that stadium level evangelism still is a thing. That's kind of what I do on a Sunday, and people actually have faith like that. Still, as much as that form has been critiqued, people still come to faith in that context. But also there's the daily, I'm leaning in, I'm loving you, we're having conversations, I'm there for you. And this might be year 2, 10 years of conversation where the Spirit's moving and things are happening because, Jesus, Luke 24 says that he was perfect in word and deed. Right. And I think those two things need to come together in our life and be people of word and deed together, not just word people preaching at everybody through our, Facebook statuses, whatever, as if anyone wants to listen to that. They're just muting you.
Yeah.
So part of it is really leaning into that relational piece.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. Whether it's village church or stadium events or whatnot. Yes, it's big events. Yes, it's proclamation evangelism. But the hope is, the ideal is those seats are filled with people that are in relationship, and the relationships we have aren't a checkbox. Okay, I got to just get them to cross the line here and become a follower of Jesus. No, we're actually going to live this life together. We're going to wrestle with the hard questions. We're going to walk this journey, and I'm going to word and deed lead you to Christ is the ideal. Mark, we'll get ready to wrap up. I thank you so much for your time. Let me ask you one last question. Whether on IG Live or on IGTV, after we conclude here on YouTube, somebody's watching, they come across this video and they're searching, they know there's more, there's a restlessness, there's a wandering, they're skeptical about the Bible, maybe the claims of Jesus, Christianity as a whole, but what would you say to that person? What's your elevator speech? What, you get in, you connect them with somebody's searching, they're trying to lean in, but they've got questions, their doubts, they're wondering. What would your encouragement be to that person tonight?
Yeah. Well, I think the doubting is okay. That's human. I think God made us in his image. We, you know, we sinned, we broke that. You feel the brokenness every day. You try to do a project of self-salvation, as one person I heard say. You try to find it in beauty and sex and relationships and in jobs and work and family, and you're constantly trying to fill this thing, and it's ever elusive, because the only way it can be filled is through the Spirit of God. And Jesus came on the cross, died for sin, rose again for salvation, as the climax to that very story, because it said that you couldn't do enough.
Right.
There's no amount of good you could do. So God had to come down the mountain for you. You couldn't go up the mountain to him. He came down for you, did what needed to be done. And now it's an issue of not trusting yourself. At the end of the day, Daryl Johnson says that in the last day, there's going to be two questions. You're going to stand before God, and one of two things is going to happen. You're going to say to God, hey, accept me based on my record and my performance, or you're going to say, accept me based on the record and the performance of Jesus for me. And at the end, and he says, I have no hope in that, in the first one. You know, the only one I hope in is the second one, in Jesus. So that's the ultimate challenge. It's not only about going to heaven when you die, it's a kind of eternal life, fulfillment, joy, peace that happens here by the supernatural power of the Spirit. And then you get a vision, you get a mission for your life. How many people, men, women, they're floundering right now because they have no mission for their life. And so all they do is scroll Instagram and look at porn and derail their life with money and a new kitchen and a new shiny nonsense. And none of it fulfills them. They have no mission. They have no purpose. They have no vision for their life. And Jesus gives you that too, you know, because you don't just get to go on and die on the spot and go to heaven. It's like, hey, how about bring the kingdom come? God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now this is your project. Here's the keys. I mean, Matthew 18, I love it. Take the keys of the kingdom. And we're all like, no, Jesus, you take them back. We don't want them. And he's like, buddy, this is your job. Go do it until your dying day. Die with your boots on. So it's a beautiful thing where we actually get a vision and a mission that connects to our identity. And I think one of the great questions of our time is the question of identity. And I think the gospel is the great fulfillment of that and gives us the best identity we could ever ask for. So.
Yeah, so powerful, Mark, so powerful. Listen, if you're watching and you're somebody who's investigating the claims of Jesus and you want to know more, I want to encourage you. We do have a resource. Click on the link in our bio. The website is goingfarther.net. There's actually a free course, Exploring Christianity. I want you to check that out. Mark, how can people connect with you, and how can they get their hands on The Problem of Jesus?
Yeah, The Problem of Jesus, just jump on Amazon. That's probably the best place to get it. I'm thankful. I see a bunch of these comments here. Hey, guys, thanks for buying the book. Thanks for your encouraging comments. I see those. Lane Dog, Kay's Country Market. It sounds like you know me. I don't know your parents. I was debating them when I first became a Christian. That's great. I don't know. I mean, maybe you'll say your real name. I can figure who you are. And then we got other people. So anyway, I am, hey, thanks for the encouragement. You know, read the book, pass it along. The point of it is, man, read a chapter. And get together with your friends for a drink and coffee, whatever, and go, every week we're going to read a chapter. We're going to hammer through this. Let's talk about it. And hopefully it's a resource to you. The other thing is there's Zondervan was telling me the other day, a DVD series with a study guide is coming out too. So it's literally like me doing the book on camera and going through it. So it might be something that you can gather people around and go, okay, look, we're going to order in pizza. We're going to watch this thing, and then we can all debate it and laugh at this guy, and bring in your skeptical friends and see if it works. So,
man, I love it. The Problem of Jesus, Mark Clark. Thank you so much, bro, for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so good to be with you. God bless. Take care.
Awesome. You too, bro.